snacks are really emerging as edible accessories. Innovators are collaborating with brands or digital creators that really align with consumers' personal values. So we're seeing innovators also leverage things like drop marketing or limited time offer product runs, which, you might traditionally associate with like the sneaker space in fashion, but it's happening now with food.
Hello and welcome to the WGSN podcast, Create Tomorrow, where we examine the future of design and product. I'm your host, Bethan, Director of Editorial at the world-leading trend forecaster, WGSN. Joining me today is Claire Lancaster, our Head of Food and Drink, and Katherine Schub, forecaster and strategist on our food and drink team, and we're discussing snacking. It's a pastime most of us enjoy dipping into on a daily basis, and here at WGSN, we've done some research into who, how and why so many of us indulge in the addictive art of snacking. So today we'll be ruminating on this topic, looking at where the trends are going and discussing how businesses and brands can capitalise on this. So we're all at home a lot more nowadays since the pandemic, and certainly during the pandemic in lockdown, I think we all enjoyed snacking and it provided much needed comfort for us all. But are we still snacking as much? And if so, why? So who better to ask than Claire Lancaster, our Head of Food and Drink? What's the overview here, Claire? Are we still into our snacks?
So overall, snacking remains a big daily staple. Some 71% of consumers around the world are saying that they're snacking at least 2 times a day, and that's according to the most recent 2022 State of Snacking report from Mondelez and Harris Poll. So consumers do continue to turn to snacking as an accessible, affordable treat to ease or reward the demands of daily life. And I think we can all probably relate to snacking a few times a day ourselves, so these numbers aren't a huge surprise. But in fact, 78% of consumers globally attest that these days it's more important than ever to actually have moments of indulgence during the day. And that comes despite rising grocery costs. So 3/4 of consumers globally still agree that they always find room in their budget for snacks. And this is especially true for millennials, where that figure rises to 80%. And as a millennial myself, I can attest to definitely not being willing to part with beloved snacks.
I guess also, Claire, a lot of us are hybrid working now, so I find it a lot harder not to snack. So I'm guessing that this is why it's evolving and we're still seeing such a high prevalence of snacking. Katherine, you're on the food and drink team. We've just published a report about this, right? So what have you discovered in our new Snacking Lifestyles report?
Yes, absolutely. So as we've called out in our new Snacking Lifestyles report, consumers are increasingly replacing meals with snacks, and over half of households make a meal of snacks weekly, enjoying lots of small plates rather than one big entree. And this is especially true for those in Asia Pacific. And one way we're seeing snacking enjoying particular growth is in morning snack consumption from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. And that pre-11 a.m. snacking space really grew about 42% in 2021. And who's actually snacking before breakfast or right after breakfast? It's mostly Gen Z consumers, 29% of them who agree that they eat a snack before breakfast, up from 19% in 2020.
I'm quite impressed that people have time to snack before breakfast. I think also probably one thing that's quite interesting, we've had obviously the cost of living crisis. Do you think there's an aspect of people not heating meals, Katherine?
Absolutely, 100%. This idea of no-cook meals has definitely bled into the breakfast occasion. And yeah, any way that consumers can be more energy efficient and save on gas costs, they'll take it into consideration.
Claire, what are the other factors that are kind of explaining this lifestyle change?
So I think that snacking in the morning is really a convenience choice for a lot of people. We have stats that show that about 2/3 or 65% of people find that it's actually easier to grab a quick snack in the morning rather than a full meal. So that's the idea of just picking up a packaged good out of your pantry and eating it, whether you're on the go or even if you're just working from home. So when it comes to the most popular snacking categories that we're seeing emerging, biscuits are interestingly really rising to the top, especially in new product development. We're really seeing the emergence of this new category of breakfast biscuits. This really speaks to the trend of snacks moving into that morning space. So in the US, we see a brand called Kinera. They've just released some breakfast biscuits, and they're really smart with the way they're doing it. They're featuring climate smart grains that are native to South Asia, things like pearl millet. And there's also a brand called Olira. They have some new breakfast biscuits as well. And those are made from ancient grains, and they come in flavors that are really lovely and appealing first thing in the morning, like cinnamon tahini, fig anise, and hazelnut carob.
So that sounds a lot healthier than your average kind of digestive, which is what I think of when I think of biscuits.
Exactly. Yeah. They're using the format of biscuits and some of those flavor profiles that are really appealing, but they're using ingredients that they make it a lot healthier. So it is snacking in the sense that you're just grabbing something quickly. But these innovator brands are really finding ways to incorporate some of those health forward ingredients as well.
And also, Claire, it sounds a lot like they're incorporating those kind of global flavors, which is something you're seeing across different food categories, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is such a huge opportunity and such a trend in the snacking space. And it's definitely coming across in the breakfast snacking category too.
Now, there's something else that you've discovered while you've been doing your research, which is absolutely fascinating to me, which is that snacks are now being used in the way that people use fashion as kind of a status symbol. It's kind of this cult of snacking. I'd love to hear a little bit more about this, Claire. Why is this happening?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we've been tracking things like It desserts. You used to have, the It fashion piece, and now you have the It dessert to these sort of must-have crisp collaborations. So snacks are really emerging as edible accessories, and they have cool currency. So what we're seeing, it's really interesting, this sort of trend moving into the food and drink space for the first time. So innovators are collaborating with brands or digital creators that really align with consumers' personal values or their identities or their lifestyles, create snacks that tap into these niche communities, or they have little nods to in-group knowledge or in-jokes. So we're seeing innovators also leverage things like drop marketing or limited time offer product runs, which, you might traditionally associate with like the sneaker space in fashion, but it's happening now with food. So these are these sort of spontaneous product release strategies. They originated in streetwear brands, and now they're moving over into this space. We also see it with really popular creators. So there's a US YouTuber, he's called FaZe Rug, and he's one of the most subscribed gamers on YouTube. He belongs to a professional esports group, and he has more than 23 million subscribers. So this is a really active community, but it's still quite niche. I mean, I really hadn't heard of it before researching this particular topic. But he's really well known among this community for vlogs or gaming or prank videos. And he's recently co-founded a gaming-themed sour candy brand called 1UP. So he's launched it in a really creative way. He's created a social media challenge where all of his followers, they have to purchase the candy online, and then they have to suck 3 of the sour candies, and they have to record themselves doing it without making any sort of faces or reacting. And they have to do it for 30 seconds. And participants can upload it using this hashtag, and then they can get money or prizes. But that's just one example of many types of these digital creators who are expanding into the packaged goods space and really leveraging that power of their hyper-engaged communities.
So it sounds like a little bit like the beauty space. Celebrities are entering the snacking space too. And I know obviously for a long time we've had celebrities doing things like Paul Newman's sauce, but is this like the latest thing that if you're a young hip celebrity, you need to have your own like crisp brand or something like this?
I think what's really making these new next generation products a little bit distinct from in the past is where perhaps a large packaged good producer would create a product in the past and then randomly look and try and find a celebrity that they could sort of slap their face on it. It felt a bit inorganic. But now I think some of these collaborations, they always speak to something that you would feel that influencer would genuinely love or use in their real life or actually want to have, or that would make sense for their audience particularly. So I think there's this element of co-creation, or there'll be little Easter eggs or whatever, put in that only followers of this brand might recognize. So little things that are hidden for people that are really in group. So you can really feel part of a community. These products might appeal to a broad range of consumers, but if you're a real follower, a real loyalist, then there's things there that you'll really get and you'll appreciate. And we've seen it in things like flavor profiles or, little names, and they just give nods and winks to that in-group community. So there's a real feeling of authenticity there.
It's time for a snack break. You're listening to the WGSN Create Tomorrow podcast, and on today's episode, we are talking all things snacking, why it's on the rise, why it's reached cult status among Gen Z consumers, and what we might expect to snack on in the future. I'm speaking with WGSN experts Claire Lancaster, our head of food and drink, and Katherine Schub, forecaster and strategist on the food and drink team. Next, we're diving into snack products, from the aesthetics of the packaging to the ingredients and exciting flavours of the future. So one thing that I think is really interesting, Katherine, I know recently as our resident strategist in New York, you took a tour of the pop-up grocer there for a forthcoming WGSN Live on how to win the Gen Z consumer. And I noticed one of the things there in that store is the attention-grabbing nature of the packaging of snacking and how exciting a lot of food packaging has become. So different from the 70s or the 80s or when I was sort of snacking a lot as a young person. So what are the key trends there, Katherine, that brands are using to kind of cut through the noise?
You're right. It's so different. And food and drink packaging for younger consumers has really taken on a more is more approach versus what we see with millennials, which is typically associated with minimalism and blank space and, Scandinavian design. So as we've called out in our key trend 2024 Gen Z food and drink packaging report, we're seeing a lot of hand-drawn, juicy typography. So moving away from sans serif, no rules, chaotic maximalism. So think bold colors, bold graphics, more is more approach to packaging. And to add to your comment about the 70s and 80s, there's also a lot of nostalgia, interestingly, in Gen Z packaging for a time that none of these consumers have actually experienced, right? But it's an aesthetic that's kind of leveraging a carefree spirit of another era. And then also we're seeing an aesthetic, an unapologetic aesthetic that champions inclusivity. So that includes, specific motifs and graphics that really point to certain communities, niche communities, micro communities, and appeal to the individuality that Gen Z really craves.
That's interesting. So the nostalgia that we're seeing in fashion is also sort of happening in snacking. And I'm guessing that people are happy to be kind of carrying these snacks around with them because they look so cool and catchy and grabbing the attention of people.
Yeah, they're really like fashion accessories.
Fashion accessories. I love that. Yeah. Rather than an it bag, you've got your it snack. So as well as the fact that snacks are kind of doubling as these cult credentials and you're like in the club or not in the club, what else is Gen Z looking for in snacks at the moment, Claire?
So all consumers, but Gen Z in particular, have this real desire for cuisine and flavor exploration. We see this trend coming up again and again across all food and drink categories, but I think snacking is particularly well placed to cater to this trend. So a top consideration for trying a new snack is, of course, innovative flavors. So we have a study that showed that 44% of North Americans find that snack discovery has inspired them to try another new but similar food. So the idea that they're introduced to a flavor through a snack and then they crave more of it and they go and find more foods or more examples of that, maybe discovering a whole new cuisine. So snacks are really emerging as these sort of gateway products for consumers looking to expand their palates. And in fact, we call this trend gateway snacking in our Snacking 2024 report.
One thing I wanted to ask about that, are brands also kind of doing limited edition flavors so that they kind of build a excitement about something for a short time and then you can't get it anymore?
Oh, brands are definitely leaning into this limited edition flavor thing. It's part of this drop marketing technique that we were talking about earlier. They'll announce them in an unexpected way, maybe online. So again, it's that if you know situation where if you're following this brand on social media or you're following a specific creator, if they've maybe partnered with a really trendy restaurant and they've taken a dish from that restaurant and made it into a packaged good. And if you're following them, you can go to the spot where they're released or you can find them for only a season. And it really creates this hype. And we call it out as hype snacks in our report. But it's really driven primarily online for younger consumers where there's this sense of discovery and this limited element of it really just reinforces exclusivity, even if the crisp itself only costs £3 or $3.
I love that. Hype snacks. That's brilliant. What else is important? I know sustainability is something, right, that Gen Z really cares about. Katherine, can I come to you on that?
Yes. For across different categories, sustainability is really baseline for Gen Z. It's, how they grew up, they're climate conscious. It's something that's super important to them, but also equally as important is also social responsibility, diversity, inclusion, and equity. And they're seeking this even in the snack brands they choose. So we saw this throughout pop-up grocer curation. Yardy World is a small snack brand that was developed by a Jamaican chef named Devon Francis, who's also a big supporter of the queer community. And his snack mix, it's a combination of chilies, nuts, and tropical dried fruit. So it's not just the combination of the flavors that speaks to the Caribbean community, but also what he stands for and what he talks about on his social media platforms. So it's kind of the whole package.
And Claire, I know wellness is very, very important now to people, to everyone, but how is that influencing snacking? Because snacking, like if I think about it, it's not actually deemed that healthy in some ways.
Yeah, and I think that perception is something that's really evolving, and that's what's really interesting to watch. So, of course, health is a big driver. So, interestingly, 78% of global consumers report that they snack regularly, take care of their bodies. And I think that they're discovering snacks that are actually can be healthy for you. They're maybe just not full meals. It's just because it's a small, easy to eat product doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be unhealthy. So consumers generally are looking for things like snacks that are vitamin rich, high in protein, things which support gut health or boost immunity. So those are some of the top concerns that we've seen growing since before the pandemic that are continue to be on the rise.
What about ingredients of the future, both of you? I was recently at a neighbour's house and they offered me some roasted crickets, which I have to say I did decline. They didn't really appeal, and I'm a pescatarian, so it felt a little bit like I was eating an animal. But in the future, with things like climate change, is this going to be on the table? Is this what we're going to be eating? Is it going to be high protein insects for snacks? Can I come to you first, Claire?
Yeah, so I think that there are rising ingredients that are really addressing the idea of climate change. We refer to them as climate hero ingredients. These are basically sustainable and nutritious alternatives to ingredients. So they're just making those swaps. I think maybe eating full insects is a little bit further out in the future, but we do see sorts of alternative proteins on the rise, as well as just products that have short, simple ingredient lists, a focus on preservative and artificial ingredient-free formulas, and just lots more natural ingredients, things like whole grains, vegetables, and healthy fats.
And Katherine, I think there are some more pleasant-sounding hero ingredients than insects, right, that are on the rise?
A little more palatable than crickets for some. So we're seeing, a lot of nutritious alternatives to traditional ingredients like lupin beans, which we've seen in formats like hummus, like lupin bean hummus and chips and different snackable formats, which are becoming a contender to soy. Also fonio, which is an ancient grain that's indigenous to Africa, also referred to as the seed of the universe. So these could be insects, but because of the kind of polarization around insects, the mainstream adoption remains a bit further out.
Oh, I've got an innovator for a neighbour. That's fascinating. Can I end by asking you each your favourite go-to snacks? Katherine, what's your go-to?
Well, I came from an ingredient as snacks family, so I very much align with that. So, I love popcorn. I love Bjorn Corn, which is a brand that is solar popcorn, and they coated a nutritional yeast, and now they came out with a new truffle flavor. That's what I think popcorn is really up there for me.
Wow, that sounds so elegant. My snack of choice is much less elegant and upmarket than Katherine's solar truffle popcorn. I think I'm shamefully just a regular chip or crisp girl, but even more embarrassingly, I've really, really gotten into some dill pickle flavored chips recently. We actually called out the flavor as trending on our site a while ago, and it's moved into sort of mainstream Lay's now, and they are so delicious. They're really acidic and just like not what you want to. I would not necessarily call them a status snack. It's not something I carry around proudly, but they are delicious.
That makes me think of pickled onion flavour Monster Munch. And on that note, nostalgic note, my stomach's rumbling. I think it's time for a snack break. Thanks so much, Katherine and Claire, for your insight around snacking, and happy snacking to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you're a WGSN subscriber, you'll find many reports on snacking on our food and drink platform, including our recently published forecast of 2025 snacking. Thank you again to Claire Lancaster, our head of food and drink, and Katherine Schub, forecaster and strategist on our food and drink team. Thanks to them for putting down their snacks, giving up their time to speak to me about this trend. If you want to find out how to subscribe, head over to WGSN to discover how you can get access to our service. We're constantly publishing new content focusing on how we can design a brighter, better future for our industries. And these now include food and drink, interiors, beauty, fashion, and consumer tech. You can subscribe to our podcast on all major podcast platforms. And if you like what you've heard, why not leave us a review on Apple Podcasts? We'll be back in 2 weeks for our next episode. Until then, you can listen to the CEO of WGSN, Carla Buzashi, on our other podcast, Lives of Tomorrow. In the next episode next week, they'll be tackling the topic of religion.